Hello everyone, and welcome back to Echoes of Fear. I know many of you watch these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, how about leaving a comment letting me know where you're watching from? If you're enjoying the case, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into the story. The road to Black River Lodge was a narrow strip of asphalt, winding through the pine-covered mountains of Montana. Anyone driving along it late at night would feel an involuntary shiver. The mist rising from the Blackfoot River cast strange shadows along the roadside, and the few cars that passed seemed to disappear into the darkness, as if swallowed by the forest. It was on one of these nights, December 5th, 1994, that a disturbing phone call reached the Missoula Police Department. The receptionist at Black River Lodge, Marianne Holloway, called 911 at 11:47 p.m., her voice low, almost a whisper. I think something's wrong with the guest in room 12. He checked in yesterday, but no one has seen him leave. His car is still here, but the door to the room is locked from the inside. I knocked, and someone answered, but it didn't sound human. The operator asked her to explain further, but the call abruptly disconnected. Sheriff Tom Grayson, a 53-year-old veteran, and his partner, Officer David Reynolds, were dispatched to check on the situation. Black River Lodge was about 40 minutes outside of town, a decaying motel surviving on the edge of bankruptcy. Owned by Hank O'Connor, a reclusive 67-year-old man, the lodge had been in his family since the 1970s. When they arrived, Marianne was waiting in the lobby, visibly shaken. I tried calling his room after the call dropped, but no one picked up. And there's something else. She pointed to the register book on the counter. Samuel Avery, 41 years old, a salesman from Fresno, California, had checked in at 4:38 p.m. the previous day. But according to the motel's phone log, there had been a call placed from room 12 to the front desk at 3:12 a.m. The call lasted exactly 6 seconds. But Marianne swears that no one spoke. She just heard slow, deep breathing, and then a click. Sheriff Grayson glanced at Reynolds, and they both walked down the hallway to room 12. The motel corridor was dark, lit only by yellowish lights attached to the walls. The worn carpet smelled of mildew, and the room numbers were slightly crooked, as though they had been hastily glued on. When they reached the door to room 12, they stopped. The silence was deafening. No TV sounds, no shower running. Grayson knocked on the door. Mr. Avery? Missoula Police. Open the door. Nothing. He knocked again, this time harder. That's when they heard it. A low, dragging sound coming from inside, like something was moving. But the door stayed shut. The sheriff tried the doorknob. Locked. He turned to Marianne. Do you have a master key? She nodded, went to the front desk, and returned with a trembling set of keys. Grayson grabbed the key and turned it in the lock. The door opened with a long, deep creak. The first thing they noticed was the smell. A strange, sweet odor, like burned paper mixed with wet earth. The second thing was the absolute silence. The room was immaculately made up. The bed neatly arranged, not a single wrinkle. Samuel Avery's suitcase was still on the armchair, open, with his clothes folded inside. The bathroom was dry, the towels untouched. But there was something wrong, something that made both officers exchange uneasy glances. The TV was on. Static, crackling on Channel 3. And on the bathroom mirror, a single message scrawled, "Help me," written from the inside of the glass. Grayson pulled his gun and began to search the room. The closet was empty, no footprints on the floor. The windows were closed and locked. Then Reynolds noticed something. The rug beside the bed was slightly lifted. He knelt down, pulled the fabric, and held his breath. The wooden floor was scratched, as if something had been dragged beneath the bed, but when they looked, there was nothing there. No exit, no body, no sign of escape. Samuel Avery was never found. And that night, Something from inside room 12 was watching them. The disappearance of Samuel Avery baffled the Missoula Police Department, with no signs of foul play, no obvious clues to explain his absence, and no witnesses to piece together the puzzle. The eerie circumstances surrounding the case had everyone questioning what exactly happened inside room 12 of the Black River Lodge. After the strange discovery, Sheriff Tom Grayson ordered a thorough investigation of the room, but no new evidence emerged. Avery's car remained parked outside the motel, the same pristine condition as when he had arrived the previous day. The motel's security footage from the lobby showed nothing unusual. Avery checking in, walking to his room. No one entered or left room 12 after that, according to the records. As the hours passed, an unsettling sensation settled over the case. Mary Ann Holloway, the receptionist, was questioned, but insisted she had seen nothing amiss, aside from the bizarre sound she had heard when Avery supposedly answered the phone call. The officers had no reason to believe she was involved, but her evident fear suggested she was hiding something. Investigating the lodge's history. The deeper they dug, the more strange facts began to surface. It was soon discovered that the Black River Lodge had a long, troubled history. Built in the early 1900s as a rest stop for travelers on the old highway, the lodge had passed through several owners over the years. But for some reason, many of the previous owners had mysteriously disappeared or sold the property in haste. Hank O'Connor, the current owner, had inherited the lodge from his brother, who had vanished in the mid-1970s, right around the time Hank moved in. Though Hank was an introverted, almost reclusive man, the history of strange disappearances linked to the place was enough to pique the sheriff's interest. The land was rumored to be cursed, but the sheriff wasn't inclined to believe in superstitions. Still, something didn't sit right. Sheriff Grayson dug deeper into the old town records of Missoula and the surrounding areas. He found unsettling patterns. Over the decades, there had been numerous reports of people staying at the lodge who never checked out. Some were found weeks later, wandering the forest in a dazed state. Others simply vanished without a trace. The authorities had always chalked these disappearances up to the remote location of the lodge and the individual's mental states. Perhaps they wandered off or committed suicide. But nothing made sense anymore. Too many coincidences. Too many strange occurrences. The darker side of the lodge. On a hunch, Grayson decided to visit Hank O'Connor. The old man's office, located behind the motel, was locked, and there was no answer to the door. The sheriff's patience wore thin, and he forced the door open. Inside, a dimly lit room cluttered with papers, old ledgers, and bizarre artifacts from the 1940s greeted them. In the corner of the room, Grayson found a photo album. The pictures were yellowed with age, but there was one picture in particular that caught his eye. It was an image of the lodge from its early days, but with a disturbing detail. A tall, dark figure stood in the background of the photograph, obscured in shadow, barely visible. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be the same figure in several other pictures. The problem was, the figure was never identified, and no one in the town recalled such a person ever existing. Grayson questioned Hank, but the man became defensive and evasive. He claimed that the photo was a relic of a time before his ownership, and that it meant nothing. But Grayson wasn't convinced. He pressed further, suggesting the old man knew more than he was letting on. Hank O'Connor's response was chilling. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sheriff. The lodge has been here long before me. The people who disappear, they come looking for something they shouldn't, something they'll never find." The sheriff's mind raced. Was this simply the ramblings of a paranoid old man? Or was O'Connor speaking about something deeper, something more sinister? A strange witness. Days later, another lead surfaced when Emily Parsons, a local journalist from Missoula, came forward with a disturbing revelation. Emily had been conducting research on the Black River Lodge for a potential story, and what she discovered was enough to stop her in her tracks. According to historical documents Emily had found in a library archive, the area around the lodge was home to a secretive group of settlers in the 1800s, known for their strange rituals. The group was believed to have vanished, but rumors persisted that they had never truly left. Locals had long whispered about odd happenings near the lodge, strange noises in the night, flickering lights, and eerie shadows. Emily claimed to have witnessed something unsettling the night before Avery disappeared. She had visited the lodge under the pretense of interviewing O'Connor, but as she walked past the rooms, she heard muffled voices coming from room 12, despite it being vacant. She couldn't explain it, but when she looked through the window to peek inside, she swore she saw a shadowy figure standing by the bed. The final clue. Sheriff Grayson returned to the lodge that night, determined to find answers. He revisited room 12, where the air felt thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. The room was now completely undisturbed, and the strange static still played from the TV. This time, however, there was something different. The mirror, which had previously shown the words, "Help me," was now blank. But beneath the surface of the glass, something seemed to shimmer. Something that wasn't visible to the naked eye. Grayson's heart pounded as he took out his flashlight and pointed it toward the reflection. For a fleeting moment, he saw it. The dark figure from the photographs. It was standing behind him, just out of reach, its eyes glowing faintly. Before Grayson could react, the light flickered and the figure vanished. The mystery of Samuel Avery's disappearance and the secrets of Black River Lodge remained unresolved. Some say the lodge is haunted, others claim it's cursed. But one thing is certain, those who venture too close to the truth often find themselves lost in its shadows. The tension that hung over Black River Lodge seemed to grow with each passing day. Sheriff Grayson was more convinced than ever that something was terribly wrong. But the clues remained dark and elusive, like a shadow slipping away just as he got close. The truth about the mysterious disappearance of Samuel Avery was on the verge of being revealed, but the circumstances involved something deeper and more sinister, something beyond what he could have ever imagined. The cold of the night seeped through the cracks in the door as Grayson and his partner, Reynolds, continued their investigation, determined to uncover what was behind the strange events. They returned to the home of the lodge's owner, Hank O'Connor, and this time they were more prepared to force answers. Old Man O'Connor, even more reclusive, remained silent for long minutes. But Sheriff Grayson's firm tone left no room for evasions. "What do you know about this, Hank? You have to tell us the truth." Hank looked down, his hands trembling. "You don't understand. You can't understand," he muttered as though speaking to himself. At that moment, Marianne Holloway, the receptionist, entered unannounced. She looked paler than ever. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying recently. "Sheriff, I found something." Grayson looked at her, raising an eyebrow. Marianne handed him an old dusty journal, its cover faded and the pages yellowed. It was Robert O'Connor's journal, Hank's brother, the man who had disappeared years ago, and about whom nothing had ever been known. The journal was filled with notes about rituals and memories of a secret society called the Guardians of the Mist, which apparently had some connection to the area. "I found this on Hank's old shelf," Marianne said, her voice trembling. "He always said it was just a bunch of old stories. But I think he knew what was going on." Grayson began flipping through the journal. The words written inside were disturbing. Robert spoke about strange visions and the sensation of being watched. He mentioned the appearance of shadowy figures on foggy nights, as if something was observing them from outside reality. As he went through the pages, references to an entity appeared, something that lived in the shadows of the forest and fed on the life force of those who ventured into the region. But the most unsettling thing was what was written on the final pages. "They came to take me, to take my soul. They won't stop until I become one of them." They want to make me the new leader of the Guardians of the Mist. I can't escape anymore. The revelation of the truth. The night was growing denser and colder as the mystery deepened. Grayson and Reynolds continued to review the journal notes, trying to connect the disjointed words with what they had found so far. That was when Marianne spoke again, her voice trembling. I saw something in the forest last night. I don't know what it was, but it had eyes that glowed in the dark. She described a tall, thin figure with a hooded face, its eyes glowing as if they were burning. I heard footsteps, and then, when I looked, it was watching me. It wasn't human. Grayson was about to ask more when suddenly he heard a noise coming from the back door. Those soft, repeated knocks seemed to grow closer, followed by a muffled whisper, a voice that was barely understandable. Leave. With a hand signal, Grayson asked for silence, and the three of them moved toward the hallway. They approached the office door, where the sound seemed to come from, but when the sheriff looked through the window, he saw something that made his heart freeze. There, across the street, at the edge of the forest, a group of hooded figures was standing still, staring at the lodge. Their faces weren't visible, but the glow from their empty eyes reflected the moonlight, as if they had been there for a long time, waiting. Marianne stepped back, already too afraid to continue. They're coming back. The final decision. Grayson felt the weight of the truth approaching, but something still troubled him. What exactly were these figures? What had Samuel Avery become? The answer was slowly revealing itself, but he knew that, at this point, he no longer had time. The lodge was about to reveal its deepest secret. They had to act quickly. But what could they do against a force that seemed so ancient and so powerful? Before the sheriff could make a decision, a loud, shrill sound came from the back of the motel. The whisper of those figures was no longer the only thing they could hear. Something inside the lodge was moving. As the air grew colder and the night stretched on, the sense of dread hanging over Black River Lodge seemed suffocating. Grayson and Reynolds stood frozen, unsure whether to run or confront the gathering figures outside. The glowing eyes of the hooded figures stared back at them with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. There was no escape now. The lodge, it seemed, had become a trap, a place where time itself distorted and the past collided violently with the present. In a sudden burst of resolve, Grayson made a decision. "We're going in," he said, his voice steady despite the growing terror. "We need to face this head-on." He motioned for Reynolds to follow him, and they pushed through the back door of the lodge, their steps heavy on the creaky floorboards. Inside, the darkness was almost absolute, with only the faintest sliver of moonlight creeping through the windows. The air was thick with an unnatural heaviness. They moved through the lodge cautiously, with every creak and groan of the old building seeming to echo around them. It felt as if the walls themselves were closing in, and the silence was so intense that Grayson could hear the blood pounding in his ears. As they approached the center of the lodge, they could feel an overwhelming presence, a force that was both watching and waiting. And then, they saw it. At the far end of the room, near the massive stone fireplace, there was a large, ornate mirror that hadn't been there the day before. Its surface gleamed with an eerie, almost liquid sheen, as if it contained something beyond the reflection of the room. Without thinking, Grayson approached the mirror. A whisper filled the air, just barely audible, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. It was coming from the mirror itself. "You shouldn't have come here." He froze, eyes locked on the reflection, but it wasn't his own face staring back at him. Number. The reflection was of someone else, Samuel Avery, his eyes hollow and lifeless, standing in the very spot where Grayson now stood. The ghostly figure smiled, though it wasn't a smile of comfort. It was something darker, more sinister. "We've been waiting for you." Suddenly, the lodge seemed to shift. The walls groaned, the floorboards cracked, and the mirror began to ripple like water. Grayson could barely catch his breath as the atmosphere grew thicker, suffocating. Reynolds grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Sheriff, we need to get out of here." But it was too late. The door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping them inside. The figures outside had moved closer, their glowing eyes now visible in the cracks of the lodge's windows. It felt as if the very air was charged with electricity, a tension so thick it was suffocating. As Grayson turned back to the mirror, he saw the reflection of Robert O'Connor, his face twisted in agony, reaching out with his hands as if trying to pull him in. "You don't belong here," Robert's voice whispered, an agonized rasp. "None of us do." And then, without warning, the mirror shattered. The glass exploded outward in a shower of shards, and for a brief moment, Grayson saw a figure behind the reflection, an ancient, grotesque shape standing in the dark, its face hidden in shadow. The ground beneath them rumbled, and the building seemed to groan in protest as though it were coming alive. The shadowy figures outside moved closer, no longer just watching, but now closing in, their faces hidden behind dark hoods. The entire room began to warp, bending and stretching as if it was no longer a physical space. And then, everything went black. When Grayson and Reynolds woke, they were lying outside the lodge, the cold morning air biting at their skin. The Black River Lodge was completely gone, vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed. The surrounding forest was still, unnaturally silent. The figures, the mirror, the voices, all gone. There was no sign of the shadowy figures, no trace of Samuel Avery or Robert O'Connor. The lodge and everything tied to it had disappeared into thin air. But as Grayson stood up, brushing the dirt off his clothes, he realized something chilling. The journal, the one that Marianne had found, was still in his hands. He opened it to the last page, which he had forgotten to look at before. The words were written in a frantic, spidery hand. "They're still here. The lodge is only a place. They are the ones who live in the mist. The mist will never leave us. We will always return." And in that moment, Grayson understood. The mystery of Black River Lodge would never be solved. The lodge might be gone, but the darkness it contained was eternal. They hadn't escaped. They had simply been released. And now it was waiting for someone else. And as Grayson turned, he noticed something disturbing. The eyes of the shadowy figures hidden deep in the woods, watching him with an unblinking stare. They were still waiting. The lodge had claimed another soul, and the cycle would begin again. Thank you to everyone listening to me right now. If you have any advice on how I can improve my videos, please leave a comment, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the like button. Now let's move on to the next story. On the night of October 14th, 1998, the quiet town of Oak Ridge, Oregon, was swallowed by a dense fog that rolled in from the Cascade Mountains. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the streets were nearly deserted, save for the occasional glow of a porch light. Oak Ridge was a town where everyone knew everyone, where nothing out of the ordinary ever happened, until that night. At 11:43 p.m., a distress call came into the Lane County Sheriff's Department. It was from a landline registered to the Fisher family, who lived in a remote cabin deep in the woods off Highway 58. The dispatcher only caught fragmented words before the line went dead. "They're outside. Oh God, they're watching. Please, hurry." Then silence. The call was traced, and Deputy Mark Hensley and Sheriff Alan Pierce responded immediately. They arrived at the Fisher home 12 minutes later. The front door was slightly ajar, creaking as it swung in the night breeze. Inside, the house was eerily silent. The living room was in disarray, furniture overturned, a shattered lamp on the floor, and a half-eaten dinner left untouched on the dining table. But the family, Daniel and Claire Fisher, along with their children, 10-year-old Lily and 7-year-old Evan, were gone. No signs of forced entry, no blood, just gone. The investigation begins. By morning, a full-scale search was launched. The local police, volunteers, and even state officials scoured the dense woods, searching for any clue as to where the Fishers had gone. Search dogs were brought in and quickly picked up a scent, bare footprints leading away from the house. The prints belonged to Daniel, Claire, Lily, and Evan. They led deep into the forest, winding between the towering pines and disappearing into the mist. But half a mile in, they just stopped, as if the family had vanished into thin air. No blood, no struggle, no signs of life. Back at the house, forensic teams combed through every inch of the property. Nothing seemed out of place, except for one eerie clue. Claire Fisher's diary, left open on the kitchen counter. The last entry, dated October 13th, read, "It's happening again. Evan says he saw the tall man outside his window last night. Lily won't sleep. Daniel thinks it's just nightmares, but I know better. They come when the fog rolls in." The tall man. Local legend spoke of a shadowy figure that lurked in the forests around Oak Ridge, a being said to whisper to children in the dead of night and lure them away. It was an old folktale, passed down through generations. No one truly believed it. Until now. The haunting discovery. A year passed. The Fisher case had gone cold, reduced to whispered conversations and late-night speculation. Then, on October 14th, 1999, a hiker stumbled upon something disturbing 3 miles from the Fisher home, an abandoned campsite. Inside a decayed tent, they found 4 neatly folded sets of clothes. They matched the description of what the Fishers were last seen wearing. Beside them lay a cassette recorder, its tape still intact but coated in dust. The tape was sent to the Oregon State Police for analysis. When they played it, the room fell into an uneasy silence. First, static. Then the unmistakable voice of Claire Fisher, hoarse, frantic. "We can't leave. We tried, but the fog, it moves with us. We hear them at night. Whispers, footsteps. Evan is sick. He won't talk anymore. Lily just stares. Daniel is gone. He walked into the trees and never came back. I don't know what to do. I don't know what they want." Then a child's voice, barely a whisper. "He's here." The tape cut to static. The final incident. By 2005, the Fisher case had become nothing more than a local ghost story. New families moved in, and the town tried to forget, until October 14th, 2008. A 911 call came in at exactly 11:43 p.m., 10 years to the day since the Fishers disappeared. The voice on the other end was trembling. "They're outside. Oh God, they're watching. Please hurry." The line went dead. Deputies rushed to the location, the same cabin the Fishers once called home. When they arrived, they found the house empty. The furniture was overturned. The food was half-eaten. The front door swung slightly in the cold night breeze. On the kitchen counter, a single cassette tape lay waiting. When they pressed play, they heard the same recording from 1999. Claire's voice, Evan's whisper. But this time, at the very end, there was something new. Heavy breathing, then a deep, distorted voice. "The fog never leaves, neither do they." Outside, a deputy noticed something in the mud, bare footprints, leading into the fog. And then, they just stopped. The house was abandoned once more, and the fog rolled in again. On the cold night of December 3rd, 1997, a devastating fire consumed Blackwood Manor, an isolated estate on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. The inferno was so intense that by the time firefighters arrived, the structure had already been reduced to a smoldering skeleton of bricks and charred wood. Inside the wreckage, they found 5 bodies, all burnt beyond recognition. It was assumed that they belonged to the Hargrove family, who had lived in the manor for generations. William Hargrove, his wife Eleanor, their twin daughters Margaret and Abigail, and William's elderly father, Richard. The official cause of the fire was ruled as faulty electrical wiring, and with no signs of foul play, the case was closed. But something didn't add up. Among the ruins, investigators discovered something deeply unsettling: a trapdoor in the basement leading to a hidden chamber that had not been touched by the flames. Inside was an old wooden chair with leather straps, a rusted chain bolted to the wall, and deep scratch marks on the stone floor. More chillingly, a metal lockbox was found in the ashes of the study upstairs, containing a collection of letters and newspaper clippings about missing persons cases spanning 3 decades. And then, the real mystery emerged. One body was missing. The investigation. 2 weeks after the fire, forensic pathologists confirmed a disturbing anomaly. The remains of William Hargrove were never found. His official death certificate was issued based on assumption, but there was no physical evidence that he had died in the fire. The town of Asheville whispered theories. Had William perished in the fire, or had he somehow escaped? And if he had, why had he vanished? Investigators reopened the case, and the deeper they dug, the more horrifying the truth became. The letters in the lockbox, some dating back to the 1960s, were addressed to William's father, Richard. They referenced the special guests and the trials, hinting at some kind of ritual or experiment. One letter, dated August 4th, 1985, simply read, "The fire must cleanse what we could not contain. You know what must be done." Investigators also found a hidden passageway behind a bookshelf in the study, leading to an underground corridor. The tunnel extended nearly half a mile before opening into an abandoned chapel, long forgotten and overgrown with weeds. Inside, they found rusted surgical tools, blood-stained stone altars, and faded portraits of the Hargrove ancestors. Something had been happening in Blackwood Manor for generations, something that the fire was meant to erase. The survivors' authorities located William's estranged younger brother, Samuel Hargrove, who had left Asheville in 1980 and never returned. When detectives reached out, he refused to speak, until one night he called the lead investigator, Detective Paul Mercer, at 2:14 a.m. Samuel's voice shook as he spoke. "You don't know what you're dealing with. My father, my brother, they weren't just killers. They were something else. I ran because I saw what was in that house. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a purge. And if William's body wasn't found, that means he's still out there." Samuel later revealed that as a child, he had once wandered into the basement and heard whispers coming from behind the walls. His father had dragged him out, his face pale with fury, and warned him never to enter again. But Samuel had seen enough. A figure strapped to the chair, writhing as if something inside was trying to break free. On December 3rd, 2002, exactly 5 years after Blackwood Manor burned, a barn fire was reported on the outskirts of town. When authorities arrived, they discovered something horrifying: a single chair placed at the center of the scorched ruins, surrounded by ash. The leather straps were intact, unburned. Nearby, the remains of 4 missing people were discovered, their bodies arranged in a pattern, a circle, with their hands interlocked. They had been reported missing in the months leading up to the fire, and their autopsies revealed something even stranger. Each had died before the fire even started. And in the dirt just outside the barn, a single set of bare footprints led into the woods, but none came back out. The case of Blackwood Manor was never solved. William Hargrove was never seen again. But the fires never stopped. A year later, on December 3rd, 2003, another fire consumed an abandoned church outside Charleston, South Carolina, 200 miles from Asheville. Inside, investigators found the same chair, the same unburned leather strap, steps and another set of footprints leading away. William Hargrove wasn't just alive, he was continuing something, and he was getting closer. Let's move on to the next story. On a frigid autumn evening in November 2006, the quiet town of Coldwater, Pennsylvania, was shaken by a terrifying discovery. A burned-out sedan was found abandoned on Black Hollow Road, a desolate stretch of highway infamous for local ghost stories and disappearances dating back over a century. Inside the car, authorities found a blood-stained notebook, its pages filled with the desperate, erratic handwriting of a woman named Dr. Eleanor Reeves, a forensic psychologist specializing in criminal insanity. But Eleanor was nowhere to be found. Her case would soon become one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in American history. The investigation begins. Dr. Reeves had traveled to Coldwater in pursuit of an unusual case, an inmate at the Black Hollow Asylum, an institution that had long since been abandoned but was recently repurposed as a high-security mental facility. The patient, a man known only as Jacob Thorne, had spent the past decade in silence, refusing to speak a word. He had been committed after a series of grisly murders that left an entire family brutally slaughtered in their remote farmhouse just outside of town. Before her disappearance, Eleanor had sent cryptic messages to her colleagues, claiming that Thorne had suddenly begun to speak, whispering eerie, fragmented sentences about the Watchers and the door that should never be opened. She seemed convinced that Thorne had knowledge of something far more sinister than his own crimes. And then, she vanished. A town's dark secret authorities searching for Eleanor Reeves uncovered disturbing evidence suggesting that Black Hollow Asylum was hiding something far worse than just a deranged patient. Surveillance footage from the night of her disappearance showed Eleanor walking into the building, but never coming out. When officers forced their way inside, they found the facility in complete disarray. Patient rooms were empty. Furniture was overturned, and deep scratch marks covered the walls, as if something had been trying to claw its way out. In Thorne's cell, they found his straitjacket neatly folded on the cot and a single sentence smeared in blood across the wall. "It sees you too." The haunting of Black Hollow Road. As the investigation continued, eerie occurrences plagued the residents of Coldwater. Strange lights flickered through the windows of the abandoned asylum at night, though power to the building had long been cut off. Locals reported seeing shadowy figures lurking near Black Hollow Road, whispering in voices that faded into the wind. And then, more people started to disappear. A highway patrol officer responding to a distress call near the asylum was found sitting in his cruiser, the engine still running, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. His partner was missing, the passenger side door flung open. The officer, though alive, never spoke another word. The final revelation. Months later, detectives followed a lead to an old mine shaft deep in the woods behind Black Hollow Asylum, a place rumored to have been used for illegal experiments in the early 1900s. There, they discovered an underground chamber filled with primitive symbols carved into the rock. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair, restraints still fastened, and a long-dead corpse in a lab coat, one that eerily resembled Dr. Eleanor Reeves. But that was impossible. She had disappeared only months earlier, and the body was decades old. In her skeletal hand, they found a notebook, mirroring the one found in the burned car. Inside, in the same handwriting, was a final warning. It's not just watching, it's waiting. The case remains open. And those who dare venture down Black Hollow Road at night often claim to see a flickering light deep in the woods, and a woman's silhouette standing in the darkness, watching. Let's move on to the next one. The disappearance of Lucy Marshall. Location: Chicago, Illinois, USA. Date: January 15th, 2024, 10:35 p.m. It was a cold, moonless night in Chicago, and the biting wind swept through the deserted streets. The city's lights flickered with the breeze, casting long, strange shadows on the sidewalks and avenues. The police were on high alert, as there was a missing person case to investigate. Lucy Marshall, a 28-year-old woman, had vanished without a trace. She lived on West Armitage Avenue, a quiet street in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Lucy wasn't the type of person to disappear without notice. She worked as a graphic designer at a local company, loved going for runs in the park, and was close to her family. However, on this particular day, she hadn't shown up for dinner with her mother, which was highly unusual. The case came across the desk of Detective Gabriel Keller, a veteran of the Chicago police force. Keller was 45 years old and had solved dozens of cases, but something about Lucy's disappearance unsettled him. He knew that when someone disappeared in a city like Chicago, it wasn't just a simple incident. There was something more to the story, something the police hadn't uncovered yet. January 18th, 2024, 10 a.m., Detective Keller's office. Keller was reviewing the details his team had gathered. Lucy had been seen for the last time at a cafe on Belmont Avenue, a busy street in Chicago near her workplace. A witness claimed to have seen her talking to a tall man with short hair and dark clothing just before she vanished, but nothing else was recorded. There were no security cameras in the area that captured clear footage of the man, and Lucy's phone had disappeared. He decided to visit Lucy's apartment to investigate the scene of the disappearance. Upon arrival, he noticed there were no signs of forced entry. The apartment was immaculately organized, as if she had left for a short trip, but something felt off. One of the kitchen windows was slightly ajar, and a cold draft made the curtain move slowly. Keller approached, and as he looked outside, he noticed something that made his skin crawl. In the parking lot, a car was parked. It wasn't Lucy's, but a dark sedan with no obvious identification. What stood out was the fact that the car had been parked recently, as the window was fogged up and the headlight was still warm to the touch. January 20th, 2024, 2:15 p.m., the first lead. As Keller and his team continued their investigation, a new lead emerged. A man named Jack Ruther, an acquaintance of Lucy, contacted the police. He claimed to have seen unusual activity at an abandoned building on West Madison Street, near the Chicago River. According to Jack, Lucy had been meeting with a mysterious man in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. He also mentioned that she had been investigating something regarding her brother, Leonard Marshall, who had died in a car accident 4 years earlier. Jack didn't know the full details, but thought it could be related to Lucy's disappearance. Keller went to the location Jack had mentioned. The office building had been closed for months, but the detective felt something was off. When he entered the loading area, he found a hidden room at the back. Inside, there were scattered papers, as if someone had tried to hide something quickly. Among the papers, Keller found Lucy's diary. The last entries mentioned a big secret related to her brother and the name of a company called Eastside Solutions, a name Keller didn't recognize. January 22nd, 2024, 11:10 p.m. Leo's Mystery. Keller and his team began investigating Eastside Solutions, which was registered in downtown Chicago. At first, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. But as they dug into the financial records, they discovered something disturbing. Large sums of money had been transferred to an account in the name of Leonard Marshall, just months before his death. Keller, now aware that Leonard's accident hadn't been a mere accident, began to question whether Leonard was involved in something much larger than just drug trafficking, as originally thought. As they dug deeper, Keller discovered that Eastside Solutions was linked to a human trafficking ring, an international operation involving local politicians, business people, and other influential figures in the city. They used the company as a front to operate in the less visible corners of the city. What shocked Keller even more was that Lucy had found evidence of this involvement and was about to expose it to the public. With this, he began to suspect that Lucy's disappearance was not random. She knew too much, and someone wanted to stop her from revealing the truth. January 25th, 2024, 2:30 a.m. The mystery unravels. Gabriel Keller discovered that Leo was, in fact, Lucy's older brother, Leonard Marshall. Leonard had died in a car accident, but the truth was much darker. Leonard had been involved with a powerful human trafficking network, an operation that included politicians, business people, and other influential figures in the city. Leonard's death had been, in fact, a murder disguised as an accident, orchestrated by his own associates, who feared he would reveal the secrets of the organization. His death had been covered up, and the investigation had been quickly closed. Lucy, upon discovering the true reason behind her brother's death, began her own investigation. She had started uncovering alarming findings, discovering that the criminal network was much closer than she had realized, with members infiltrating the highest echelons of the city. Keller was horrified to realize that the evidence Lucy had found could not only destroy the people involved in trafficking, but also the very foundations of power in Chicago. Lucy had been kidnapped and forced into silence. The evidence of her death was being carefully hidden, and her family had been manipulated into not raising suspicion. January 27, 2024, 6:40 p.m., the shocking discovery. Keller received an alarming phone call. He learned that one of the witnesses he had interrogated during the investigation, a man named David Graves, had been found dead in his home. Graves was an investigative journalist who had been close to Lucy and apparently knew more about the case than he had initially revealed. When Keller arrived at David's house, he found a notebook on his desk where the journalist had written about his findings. David's journal indicated that he and Lucy were about to publish a series of reports on the criminal network, but before they could do so, both had been silenced. January 30th, 2024, 9 a.m. Lucy's legacy. The case of Lucy Marshall became a landmark in the fight against corruption in Chicago. Using the gathered evidence, Keller and his team were able to arrest those responsible for the human trafficking ring, including business people, lawyers, and even influential local politicians. When the case was finally solved, the truth behind Lucy Marshall's disappearance was revealed, and those responsible were brought to justice. The city of Chicago was shocked by the extent of the corruption and crime that had been hidden behind respectable facades. Lucy, though lost, had become a symbol of resistance against the shadows of the city. She had unraveled a mystery that seemed unsolvable and, at the same time, saved innocent lives by bringing to light a criminal network that was corrupting everything it touched. Keller, though satisfied to have solved the case, felt a quiet sadness. Lucy had paid the ultimate price for the truth, and he couldn't help but wonder how many others were being forced into silence. In the end, he knew that the fight against corruption and crime was far from over. Lucy's final phone call before disappearing, the cryptic message she had left for her mother, "I know the truth about Leo," would never be forgotten. She had left a legacy of courage, and her death would never be in vain. Thanks for those who are still listening. Let's move on to the next. The vanishing of Emma Richardson. Location: New Orleans, Louisiana, USA. Date: March 3rd, 2024, 11:45 p.m. The humid air of New Orleans hung heavy as the neon lights of Bourbon Street flickered in the distance. A thick fog rolled over the Mississippi River, and the sound of distant jazz echoed through the streets. It was a city alive with music and mystery, but tonight, something far darker was unfolding. Emma Richardson, a 33-year-old photographer, had gone missing without a trace. She had been last seen near the famous St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, just outside the French Quarter, where she had been working on a photo project. The police were already deep in their investigation, but the case remained unsolved. Emma had always been a wanderer, someone who loved capturing the obscure beauty of New Orleans. She had a passion for photographing abandoned buildings, secret alleyways, and eerie cemeteries. But when she didn't return to her apartment after her photo shoot, her friends began to worry. Emma had no history of disappearing on her own, and her work was a significant part of her life. She had been meticulous in documenting everything she did, so her sudden absence was perplexing. Detective Marcus Hill, a seasoned investigator with the New Orleans Police Department, was assigned to the case. At 50 years old, Hill had seen his share of bizarre disappearances, but something about Emma's case felt different. The circumstances didn't add up, and the lack of clues was maddening. The city of New Orleans had its secrets, but Hill knew this was something deeper, something that needed to be uncovered. March 5th, 2024, 9 a.m. Detective Hill's office Hill sat at his desk, reviewing the case file. Emma had last been seen at 7:30 p.m., walking along the perimeter of St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. A couple had passed her on their way out of the cemetery and noted that she appeared to be taking photos of the tombstones. They didn't recall seeing anyone else around her at the time. Emma's camera, which had been found abandoned near the cemetery entrance, was the only lead the police had. Her phone, wallet, and purse were all missing. There were no signs of struggle or foul play, and no security cameras nearby had captured anything useful. The detective was about to review the photos on Emma's camera when his phone rang. It was an anonymous tip from a woman who claimed to have seen something suspicious the night Emma disappeared. The woman, who refused to reveal her identity, said she had seen Emma talking to a tall man in a dark coat near the cemetery's back entrance. She described the man as having a distinct tattoo on his neck, an intricate design of a snake wrapping around a dagger. Hill decided to follow up on this lead. The tattoo description seemed unusual, and he knew it could be crucial. He arranged for his team to search for anyone matching that description, but the lead seemed to be a dead end. No one in the area seemed to know anything about the man. March 8th, 2024, 1 p.m. The hidden letter. While searching Emma's apartment, Hill's team discovered something chilling. Beneath the floorboards in her bedroom, they found a small, old-fashioned envelope. Inside was a letter written by Emma, dated 2 weeks before her disappearance. In the letter, she described feeling followed by someone, a man who had appeared at several of her photography locations. She mentioned the same tattoo that the anonymous woman had described and expressed concern about the man's intentions. Emma had even written that she believed she was being watched by a secret organization that operated in the shadows of New Orleans, one with ties to the city's old voodoo culture and elite circles. The letter mentioned a name, Harlan Duval. Hill was intrigued. He had never heard of Duval, but the letter's ominous tone suggested something dangerous. It wasn't long before Hill discovered that Harlan Duval was a wealthy businessman with ties to several powerful families in the city. He owned a local art gallery in the Garden District, which catered to high-end clients. His reputation was that of a reclusive, eccentric art dealer with a passion for rare artifacts. Hill's gut told him that Duval was somehow connected to Emma's disappearance. March 12th, 2024, 5 p.m. The Garden District Detective Hill and his team arrived at Duval's art gallery in the Garden District, a grand building with ivy-clad walls and expensive paintings lining the interior. The place was pristine and silent, its white marble floors gleaming under the soft lighting. When Hill asked to speak with Duval, the receptionist seemed uneasy but agreed to let him in. Moments later, a tall man in a dark coat emerged from a back room. Hill immediately recognized him as the same man Emma had been photographed with in one of her last projects. Duval had the snake and dagger tattoo on his neck. "Detective Hill?" Duval greeted him with a cold smile. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Hill didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Where's Emma Richardson?" Duval's expression remained unreadable. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Hill didn't believe him. He pressed Duval further, questioning him about his connection to Emma and the strange letter she had written. Duval remained calm but evasive, offering little more than cryptic responses. But Hill's instincts told him Duval was hiding something. He made a mental note to return to the gallery later, knowing there was more to this story. March 15, 2024, 10 p.m. The Hidden Room. After further investigation, Hill and his team learned that Duval owned a private residence hidden deep within the French Quarter. It wasn't listed on any maps, and only a few trusted people knew about it. Hill suspected that Emma might be trapped there. He made his move that night, slipping through the narrow alleys of the quarter and finding a hidden door that led to an underground network of tunnels. These tunnels, used in the past for smuggling during the Prohibition era, had long since been forgotten by most of the city. As Hill ventured deeper into the labyrinth, he could feel the weight of the darkness around him. The air was thick and musty, and the walls seemed to close in on him. It wasn't until he reached a dead-end chamber that he discovered a hidden door. Behind it was a room filled with old voodoo artifacts, rare paintings, and strange, unsettling objects. It felt like a shrine, a place of power that connected the past with the present. And then, there she was, Emma Richardson, bound and unconscious, lying in the center of the room. March the 17th, 2024, 8 a.m. The truth revealed. Emma woke up in the hospital several hours later, disoriented but alive. As she slowly regained consciousness, she recalled her harrowing ordeal. She explained that after meeting Duval near the cemetery, she had been drugged and taken to the hidden room beneath his residence. Duval had wanted her to stop her investigation into the voodoo connections in the city's elite circles, as he feared that the secrets of the old New Orleans would be exposed. Duval, along with a group of wealthy individuals, was using the city's ancient rituals for power and profit, and Emma's photography had threatened to unravel their operation. Emma's discoveries had been far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Duval and his associates had been involved in a secret society that practiced dark rituals, and they were willing to go to any lengths to protect their empire. Thanks to Emma's bravery and the detective's persistence, Duval and his entire network were brought down. The case was a turning point for the city of New Orleans, as the dark underbelly of the elite was exposed for the world to see. Emma's photographs were eventually published, revealing the twisted history of the city's power structure and its hidden ties to the occult. As for Detective Hill, the case left a lasting impression on him. He had uncovered secrets buried deep in the heart of New Orleans, and while he had brought justice to Emma, he knew that the shadows of the city would always hold more mysteries. We're going to the end of the video. Anyone who can subscribe will help a lot. The channel graphics show that most of the people who watch the videos and listen to the stories are not subscribers to the channel. So if you can subscribe, it will help a lot, so that I can continue with this project. I am passionate about the topic, and I want to be able to continue working with it. Like the video and leave a comment. And let's go to the end. Location: Albuquerque, New Mexico, USA. Date: May 6th, 2024, 9:15 p.m. Albuquerque's warm desert air clung to the streets as the city's skyline glimmered beneath a sea of stars. The streets of Old Town were quiet, with only the occasional sound of tires on asphalt and distant laughter from the late-night bars. It was on one of these quiet nights that Clara Hayes, a 27-year-old schoolteacher, vanished. She had been seen earlier that evening at a local art gallery, attending an opening for a new exhibit. Clara had texted her friend to let her know she would be home soon, but by midnight, her phone was dead, and she never made it back. Clara was well known in the city for her passion for art and her work with local children. She was a bright, optimistic woman who often spent her free time volunteering at after-school programs. So when her absence was noted, it sent shockwaves through the small but tight-knit community. The police launched an investigation, but as the hours turned into days, it seemed as though Clara had simply vanished into thin air. Detective Olivia Moreno, 40, was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator with a reputation for being tough and resourceful, Olivia had dealt with her share of disappearances. However, Clara's case seemed eerily different. The lack of any concrete evidence and the overwhelming sense of an inexplicable disappearance weighed heavily on her. May 9th, 2024, 2:30 p.m., Detective Moreno's office. Olivia sat in her office, the case file spread out in front of her. Clara had last been seen at the opening of the Desert Visions exhibit at the Canyon Road Art District, a place that attracted a mix of local artists and tourists. Clara had texted her friend, Sarah Timmons, around 10:30 p.m., saying she was heading to her car. That was the last anyone had heard from her. The first clue that surfaced was an eyewitness, a man named Miguel Rios, who worked security at the art gallery. He claimed to have seen Clara leave the gallery and walk toward her car, which was parked in a nearby lot off 4th Street Southwest. But he didn't recall seeing anyone else in the vicinity. No one had seen her get into her car, and there were no signs of a struggle or altercation in the area. It wasn't until Clara's car was found abandoned near the base of the Sandia Mountains, around a mile away from the gallery, that things began to take a darker turn. The car was parked on the side of the road, its engine still warm, the door slightly ajar, but Clara was nowhere to be found. Clara's purse, which contained her phone and wallet, was found in the passenger seat. The phone was turned off and her wallet had been untouched. The lack of any signs of foul play only deepened the mystery. Olivia knew this wasn't a simple case of someone going missing. Something was wrong. May 12th, 2024, 8 a.m., a mysterious lead. As Olivia continued her investigation, a new lead surfaced. A woman named Diana Bennett, a local herbalist and self-proclaimed psychic, called the police with information about Clara's disappearance. Diana claimed she had been having vivid dreams about a woman trapped in an underground chamber, surrounded by old relics and strange symbols. Diana believed that Clara was still alive and that she had been taken to an abandoned property outside the city, a place once used as a ranch before it had been shut down decades ago. The idea of following a psychic's lead made Olivia uneasy, but with the case becoming more frustrating by the day, she decided to investigate. Diana gave her the location of the old ranch, which was located near the town of Tijeras, east of Albuquerque. Olivia and her team drove out there, crossing through a barren stretch of desert, and eventually arrived at a rundown property that had seen better days. The ranch had long been abandoned, its rusted gates sagging and its buildings covered in overgrowth. When Olivia and her team entered the property, they found what looked like an old weathered shack. The door creaked as it opened, and the musty air inside carried the scent of decay. On the floor were several old maps and drawings, some of them depicting the nearby mountains with strange markings and symbols. One of the maps caught Olivia's eye. It appeared to show a network of underground tunnels beneath the ranch, tunnels that were not listed on any public records. In the corner of the room, Olivia discovered a box of old relics, objects that appeared to be tied to Native American culture, but with a strange twist. Some of the symbols matched the ones seen on the maps. As Olivia sifted through the items, she found a piece of paper hidden under a stack of old photographs. The paper was handwritten, and it contained a set of instructions. The ritual must be completed before the blood moon rises. Only then can the gate be opened. May 15th, 2024, 4:30 p.m. The truth behind the ranch. Olivia knew she had stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple missing persons case. She began to dig into the history of the ranch and discovered that it had once belonged to a man named Vincent Markham, a wealthy businessman with controversial ties to underground organizations and occult groups. Markham had owned the property in the 1960s and 1970s before disappearing mysteriously, with rumors suggesting that he had been involved in illicit rituals and practices. As Olivia continued her investigation, she learned that Markham had been obsessed with the supernatural, and had believed in an ancient ritual that could grant him power over life and death. The ritual, according to local legends, required the blood of a young woman as a sacrifice to open a gate, a portal to another realm. The symbols and maps found in the shack indicated that Markham had been attempting to locate and harness these powers before his disappearance. Could Clara have been taken as part of this dark ritual? Olivia's suspicions were confirmed when she found more information about the occult group that had once frequented the ranch. It seemed that Markham had been part of a secret society that operated in the shadows of Albuquerque's elite. The group believed in ancient rites, passed down through generations, that promised to unlock forbidden powers. Clara, with her knowledge of local history and her deep interest in the city's past, had inadvertently uncovered Markham's dark history and had been targeted as a result. May 18th, 2024, 10 p.m., the final confrontation. With the pieces of the puzzle finally coming together, Olivia realized that Clara was still alive, but her time was running out. The blood moon was approaching, exactly as the instructions had warned. Olivia and her team rushed to the ranch, hoping to find Clara before it was too late. They made their way down to the underground tunnels, following the map that had been left behind. Deep within the tunnels, they discovered a hidden chamber, and in the center of the room was Clara, unconscious, but alive. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and strange markings covered the walls. As Olivia approached Clara, she noticed a figure standing in the shadows. It was Vincent Markham, or rather, what was left of him. The man had aged decades beyond his years, his skin stretched tight over his bones. He had been attempting to complete the ritual, but something had gone wrong. Markham, now a twisted shadow of his former self, turned to Olivia and hissed, "You cannot stop what is already in motion." With quick thinking and a shot from her sidearm, Olivia disabled Markham, preventing the ritual from being completed. The ancient powers he had sought were not meant to be unleashed, and with Markham's defeat, the ritual was broken. May 20th, 2024, 1 a.m., the aftermath. Clara was rescued and returned to her family, though she was deeply shaken by her ordeal. As for Olivia, the case had left an indelible mark on her. The investigation had uncovered a dark chapter of Albuquerque's history, one that had been buried for decades but had not yet been erased. The strange cult and its leader, Vincent Markham, had been vanquished, but there were always more secrets to uncover in the shadows of the desert. As the case closed, Olivia couldn't help but think about the strange instructions she had found. Only then can the gate be opened. There were always whispers, always rumors of things hidden just beneath the surface of the world. And in New Mexico, a place steeped in mystery and history, the gates were never truly closed. Thank you for watching Echoes of Fear. If you enjoyed this story, hit like and subscribe so you never miss a new mystery. Your support keeps the fear alive. Stay tuned for more chilling tales. And remember, shadows always have something to say. Until next time, good night. I hope you have sweet dreams tonight. See you next time.